Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. I want to begin by first acknowledging that we are hosting this event from the UBC Okanagan campus, and it's situated on the traditional and ancestral unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan Nation. I also want to acknowledge that you may be joining us from many different places, both near and far. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands as well. My name is Joan Batorf, and I am director of the Institute for Healthy Living and Chronic Disease Prevention here at UBC Okanagan and a professor in the School of Nursing. I am really delighted to welcome you to our very first event of our 9th annual Okanagan Embrace Aging Month, and warmly thank you all for joining us. Embrace Aging is co-hosted by our Institute for Healthy Living and Chronic Disease Prevention here at UBC Okanagan, our partners, Interior Savings and Credit Union, and Interior Health. We launched Embrace Aging 9 years ago to celebrate and raise awareness about positive aging. And once again, we've organized a host of educational opportunities, activities, and events during the month of March. The sessions are really designed for everyone, young and old alike, and focus on a variety of topics related to healthy aging. Our goal is always to inspire everyone to improve quality of life among seniors and family caregivers, and really all of us to embrace positive aging. Some of you may notice closed captioning on your screen, and if you do, you can manage that captioning by moving it to a place that's better for you or turning it off by using the live transcript button on your menu. There will be an opportunity to type questions and comments in the chat box at any time during the presentation. Encourage you to do that, and we will present those to our speaker towards the end of the session. So today's event, I'm very pleased to introduce to you our speaker, who is Dr. John Muñoz, who has a PhD in computer science interaction and is a postdoctoral fellow working in the System Design and Engineering Department at the University of Waterloo, and is also collaborating with our UBCO researchers, in particular, Dr. Jen Jacoby here on our campus as well. So we're really delighted to have John with us today to share some of his research related to games and virtual reality for healthy aging. So I'm going to turn it over to you, John. Looking forward to hearing about your work.
Good, John. Thank you for inviting me. As you mentioned before, my collaboration with some of the UBC colleagues, as Professor Jennifer Boger, has been around the topic of games and virtual reality and how to use these technologies to promote healthy aging. So I would like to thank you, all of you, for being here this morning, afternoon, and my local time. I'm here at the University of Waterloo. I want to do a brief introduction of myself, then we can jump directly to the topic. So the type of research I do, it has a little bit of a dualism between me being a researcher, which I've always tried to study the subject in a very careful manner. I'm always find myself as a passionate game designer. So we tried always to define specific elements of the game, like the mechanics, stories, technology, and aesthetics, and try to work collaboratively with others to build the games that we want. What a game designer does. So I did my bachelor's degree. I'm originally from Colombia. I did my bachelor in physics engineering. I did a master in bioengineering. I started working more with some sensors that we will see later today in this talk. My PhD was in human-computer interaction, in Portugal, and then I moved to work in a topic that is interactive assistive technologies at the University of Waterloo. And I'm showing this because some of the examples and the projects that I'm going to show you have been basically conducted in the different countries where I have been living and doing my research. My areas of research are virtual reality and games for health. So I have been especially designing games that have the potential of creating a positive impact in older adults' well-being. I have also worked with children and young adults. I am passionate about working and exploring the responses of people, specifically the body responses when people are interacting with the system. So I work with body signals and try to analyze things like heart rate or some others electrophysiological signals that can be used to better describe what people are feeling or what is the level of stress of people when they're interacting with the system. I have also been lately doing some research in the human-robot interaction field. For today, we're going to take on these two topics, virtual reality and games for health, and how I have been also using some body sensors to record some responses and try to see how effective games can be to elicit specific responses. So I'm going to try to introduce to you to the world of extra gaming. What are the conventional descriptions and the conventional definitions of what an extra game is, and how this is becoming a very emerging field when studying games and the interaction of people when playing those games. For those that are not really familiar with the topic, in extra games, what we are trying to create is an enjoyable way of making exercise. So we try to mix and combine elements from conventional game design, like scoring, competition, motivation, leaderboards, and we try to combine those things with movement. So we provide specific elements for people to move while they're playing, and we expect those movements to have a positive impact on people's physical activity and cognitive well-being. So there's plenty of extra games already there for entertainment, for physical rehabilitation, for exercise promotion, and even for cognitive training. In a nutshell, the type of hardware that is being popularized among these type of games can be categorized into three different categories. The first, called off-the-shelf video game consoles. So I don't know if you are familiar with things like the Nintendo Wii or like the Kinect, where you have like all of these sensors and cameras that can somehow track specific parts of your body and allow you to create interactions within the game environment. So Nintendo Wii, you can see there's plenty of games already created by Nintendo, pretty interesting and good from an interaction point of view. They're very much engaging games. They haven't necessarily been created for older adults, but there's a lot of evidence on the positive impact of using these games. As a second type of hardware for these, we got like a little bit of more novel and more immersive technologies. So this is a virtual reality headset, which you just can use it as a head-mounted display. That's kind of like the name that they use to describe this type of immersion. As you can see here in the video, once you wear the headset, then you will be able to feel certainly more immersed into those extra games. Again, you will need something like a controller to be able to activate things inside a virtual environment. So you are still you still need to move in order to interact inside the virtual environment, and not necessarily doing it from in a conventional, or when you use a conventional controller, when you just really need to press some buttons in order to interact, but you actually need to move around. The third type of hardware that's being used for these technology are adaptive equipment. So there's plenty of people working in the exercise and fitness domain, trying to bring things like stationary bikes, things like rowing machines, and try to create experiences that are somehow more entertaining for people while doing exercise. So this is, in a nutshell, 3 different hardware elements that have been already used to promote extra games, and all of them have been already being used among older adults. So there's studies showing different effects of these hardware. Now that's more related to the hardware point of view. Now, when it comes to designing the content, so I also have seen kind of like 3 different categories when designing the specific content. So the first is basically working with commercial grade extra games. You have all the Wiimote or the Kinect games that are already created by companies like Nintendo or Microsoft. Very like interesting from an interaction point of view. However, some research is pointed out that while older adults, when playing these games, can have like a lot of fun and entertain themselves, that also can be somehow prejudicial to their specific physical health, because those games are not specifically tailored or especially created to tackle some of the elements regarding aging, like the range of movement, for instance, or the amount of physical activity that is required to defeat your enemy inside the virtual environment. For that, some researchers kind of like proposing, using conventional kind of like games that are already there, but try to be able to tune some of the interaction paradigms. So you will be able to work, to play conventional games, and in this case, you will be doing some physical activity in order to make things happen in the virtual environment. And then you will be able to somehow modulate the intensity of that physical activity while, keeping good graphics of games that have been professionally created. The third approach is more the type of approach that we do, and the one that I have been doing through my research career, which is trying to make custom-made extra games. And I will show you a couple of examples of how they look like. But in a sense, these custom-made extra games require most of the times some hardware like controllers, similar to the Wii, some sensors or things like cameras to record the motion or the movement of people. And then we kind of like join together with designers and exercise professionals to custom make content that is supposed to be more tailored for the specific population we are targeting. In this case, you can see this is an example of specific extra games created in Portugal for older adults, and those are supposed to be, somehow friendly regarding the amount of movement that you need to interact with the system. So the scientific evidence of using these extra games among older adults, although is not conclusive, still gives us like a very interesting view on why people are using these games and why we are hypothesizing that these games are certainly bringing a positive impact among older adults for physical activity and for cognitive well-being as well. So they are motivating. So there's good research showing that this can be done in a sustainable manner, and people are actually enjoying playing the games more than they normally enjoy conventional exercises. There's good evidence that they improve mobility in aspects like functional fitness, like for instance flexibility or musculoskeletal fitness. And there's more and more growing evidence that because of the exercise and also the cognitive demand of some of the games, So these games can also be used to provide or to be cognitively stimulating, so on, improve things like memory, processing speed, and others. So, I've been checking multiple reviews on this topic, and I just this one is one of them. It's called Health Benefits of Digital Video Games for the Aging Population. It's a systematic review, and this is one of the quotes that they mentioned: video game-based interventions are helpful in promoting physical health, mental health, among other goals. So they took, it was a total of 23 randomized control trials showing how extra games can be used to combine or to complement conventional exercises and to bring some positive effects when being used among older adults. However, not everything is positive. Like this is an emerging field. You're talking about extra games that have been there for 1 decade. So the Nintendo Wii, for instance, was like a clear spark on this movement. But there's not necessarily a lot of research actually confirming that by using this and this and this extra games, then older adults will get specific benefits. So despite of those positive things, there's still a lot of research needs to be done in order to demonstrate the long-term effects of using this. So more than 6 months, 9 months. So what is going to happen with a lot of these physical domains is there's a person training using these extra games per week, once or twice. There is, of course, a need of improving personalization of the systems, because some of those games are not always personalized to each individual's needs and motivation. And still, there's some technology out there that it's not very accessible. So there's also need to investigate what is the cost effectiveness of this technology, and what are the metrics that we can use to really quantify if somebody is progressing or not, if it's receiving or having a positive impact on their physical and mental health. Because of those problems, I would like to show you some of the experiences and some of the games that I have been able to design with different things across different countries, and I hope you can relate to some of the problems and the technology that we already discussed. Everything started back in my country, Colombia, when I was doing a master, and I had this gathering with some clinicians. They were working a lot on, how to implement new technologies inside their rehabilitation center. So they allow us to create a dedicated room in which people would be able to come and play some extra games while they were doing physical rehabilitation. We were designing some of these games along with physical therapists and exercise professionals. And then we were using some of them as a way to complement the conventional rehabilitation sessions that they were having. So in a 1 hour rehabilitation session, they were having half an hour of conventional rehabilitation, and then they were coming to our room to play some games. And then we were integrating all of this already in a rehabilitation center. That was a fantastic experience that I had working with clinicians and exercise professionals, and that led me towards pursuing my career in this specific topic. Still, at that time, I was needing a little bit of more background information and more fundamentals on how to model users, how to better understand what are the needs of older adults when they decide to use specific elements to do physical activity. So the type of methodology that I discovered, and I was studying during my PhD in human-computer interaction, it's called user-centered design. And in a sense, what we try to do in user-centered design is to involve the end users in early stages of the design process in a way that they can inform and shape the development or implementation of the product, in this case, the game that we are trying to create. And there are many ways in which you can involve people when designing technology. So you can involve them as testers, which is, I will say, 80 or 90% of the technology that is out there that is supposed to be beneficial for older adults. This is the way that it's created. They use it as testers. They develop something internally in the company or internally at the research laboratory, and then they bring older adults and they test. So it's not, it's quick, it's certainly straightforward. The chances of adoption are certainly low because you are not considering a lot of this specific motivation, or you are not getting to know the end user of your system. You can also involve them as informants. That means, constantly asking them over specific things that you want to know, and bring in the system, and constantly checking the specific features that you are building in your system, and see what is the reaction of those features among the end users. So it is, it's interesting because it adds more informed decision making, but it requires more availability from what we call informants, people that are coming and helping us to shape that. What I like to use during what I've been using during my research career is more involving older adults as co-designers. That means I would sit down together, we play some games together, and then I start getting to know what are their preferences and intrinsic motivators that they have to play games. Once I get to know those things, then I bring the technology that is supposed to be part of the training program, and then I try to build games that can be familiar to this population. So in this case, we're moving more from a passive point of view towards an active involvement of end users. So this is an example of something that I did during my team in Portugal. So I first met with sports scientists and kinesiologists. We defined a list of different movements that were supposed to be beneficial to promote things like motor ability, balance, agility, or cardiorespiratory fitness, or even muscular strength in the upper, lower limbs. Then once we define all of those movements, then I spent some time with older adults in Portugal. At that time, I managed to learn Portuguese, so the communication was straightforward. And then we were basically sharing time, and I was checking what were the activities that they were getting involved. And, I was constantly modeling and better understanding their likes and preferences. And then once we did that, we started developing some games to see how to integrate extra gaming technologies in. This is a senior gymnasium where they were coming to do exercises together. So this is something that we call an archetype or a user persona, which is in a sense, a very brief average representation of, some of the people that we've seen. We constantly do this to better understand, what are the, common preferences and frustrations and goals that people would like, as well as the technology literacy that some of them might have. I mean, this is like all the archetypes. You might or not be or feel familiar with it, but still it helps because there's a lot of people in the development part, they don't have access to talk, or they don't have the time to talk with the end users. So we bring this as a way to, help them to better recreate who is the end user for the system. So we created one, as you can see here, this is more like a skeptic profile where we see like, this person, for instance, doesn't have a lot of literacy with video game consoles, although the person uses computers and mobile phones. And you have some, the different motivation of playing extra games. So we created multiple archetypes actually in order to better communicate among technologies. So the type of games we did were floor projected games. As you can see here, this is a game. Portugal is all about producing wine. So we were bringing all of these touristic activities in different regions of Portugal. So in this region, they were, for instance, stumping and getting the juice from the grapes So they needed to bring grapes to the tanks, and they needed to stomp. That is cardiovascular step-in activity. And that's when they do a little bit of trunk flexion extension, and they need to move this basket car downhill. That's when they need to transport the wine barrels. So they need to move the barrels to the boats, and then they keep going with the rowing here. And then rowing is it's an excellent activity to promote upper limb flexibility as well as cardiovascular activity. So we took that into the games that we were creating there. We have activities also that were recreating different elements or like different places in Portugal, and the people that were using were somehow familiar with the content that they were having. We run a study, and then we're noticing differences when we were using these extra games in combination with other exercise modalities, and then we compare that against conventional exercise alone. What we found was, after 3 months of exposing this to 2 hours per week, the interaction with the game was around 30 minutes. So we noticed that people, older adults, community willing older adults, have an interesting improvement in, there is a test called the chair stand test, which helps you with the lower limb strength, the arm curl test, which is for upper limb strength. They also had improvements in flexibility, and they also have improvements in upper limb strength. So those are, some improvements that we noticed only by checking the usability of these games in 3 months in a group of 15 community willing older adults. So one of the ideas that spun off after this was, facilitating the creation of a platform like this, which would be able to be used in senior care facilities, where it's going to be this small robot that would be able to be projecting games here and there, depending on who wants to play, or depending on the how exercise professionals want to use. So based on that one, we also decided to use heart rate as a way to, drive some adaptations in the game. So we noticed that sometimes people were playing the game, and since they were really eager to get more and more points, some people were eventually over-exercising themselves, and that can be, dangerous for people with cardiovascular disease. So we wanted to control a little bit more into the heart rate responses. So what we did, we created a replica of the conventional Pong extra game. And then what we did was basically using some wearable devices. So I actually have one of them here. This is more like a chest strap sensor. So you connect this, skin contact, and then you can collect some heart rate and some heart rate variability parameters, and send those to the game in a way that the game can create adaptations based on your heart rate in real time. So what we did was basically, this is kind of like the computational way in which this system works. So we first collected the heart rate during resting, and we check also the age of people. With that, we know what is the target heart rate, so the heart rate levels in which you are supposed to be exercising to maximize that cardiovascular activity. So we connected all the sensors connected the sensor and the information with the game, and then the game was constantly checking if people were or not in those targeted levels. So when they were not getting into the targeted levels, when they were under those levels, so what we were doing was the little ball was increasing the speed, so they needed to move faster in order to catch up, in order to catch the ball. But if they were not over exercise, but they were over the target, then the ball was getting a little bit smaller. Again, we run an experiment that was 6 weeks, 3 times per week with this specific game. And we beyond evaluated the physical benefits of using it, we also evaluated the cognitive aspects of people when they were playing the game. And we compare this adaptive game versus the same game without the heart rate adaptation or the heart rate information. So we noticed some of the people were having improvements. There was a group of 18 community willing older adults that play this during 8 times in 6 weeks. So we noticed some changes in processing speed, again, cognitive benefits and memory, and the total cognition that we were testing using a test that is called the Edinburgh. So this is the game. Again, it's projection. People need to move here and there. They were using the sensor. The sensor was streaming. It was sending the heart rate information to the game. And then we were capturing the game, capturing the heart rate levels. And then we were making the decisions based on those. So as you can see here, the ball initially can be a little bit slow, but then when it gets faster and faster, it gets tricky to catch. We compared, we also did preliminary studies comparing the use of this adaptive, physiologically adaptive game versus conventional exercises that the same older adults were conducting inside the senior gymnasium. And then we noticed that there were some differences in the time that people were spending in their specific target levels. So this is all about, working with floor projection and how we were using that specific technological setup to foster some movements of people. Have you seen probably lately the technology in games is certainly moving towards more immersive scenarios. So when I arrived here to Waterloo, one of the challenges that I had working with Professor Jennifer Boger was actually how to design specific games similar to the ones that we did in Portugal that were contextually rich. So when the older adults were playing the games, they didn't, feel that was like a totally unrelated content, but they were kind of like feeling some level of familiarity to the content, and also how to provide or how to create games that will be able to engage them in physical activities. So we started working more and more with this type of setups. And again, the first thing I tend to do when working with older adults is trying to, create more or less a user model. Again, this is an archetype. It doesn't apply for all the, all the adults, but it's a good tool that gives me some ideas of, what is the type of people I'm going to be dealing with, especially when it comes to working with game designers and game developers. It's very important they have this mental model of the user. So as you can see here, probably some of you will relate or not to this fictional character called Charles Walker. As you can see here, there's some preferences in terms of the digital devices, like for instance, there's a preference for using mobile phone or using now the smart TV or the speakers rather than using game consoles or computers or laptops. Also, the motivators for playing games, especially during COVID, is more towards escaping reality or recreation, or sometimes has a coping mechanism towards social isolation. Some of the games that are popular among them can be like Candy Crush, Scrabble, or Solitary. You can send me a message in the chat, telling me what is the type of game that you normally like to play. So maybe we will see some older games very different to this one that I found. So once we have a model of the user, then we move to see how this technology can be useful. So when I arrived here to Waterloo, there was some researchers already doing things like this type of basic scenarios in virtual reality. So you need to kind of like organize apples and oranges, and you have activities like you need to be moving or trying to get a butterfly that was flying around. And this is people, older adults with cognitive impairments. Some people that were subjectively reporting dementia or mild cognitive impairment. But then what we noticed at the time was, we got some limitations with this technology. So I don't know if you noticed here, you needed a computer, you needed a screen, you needed a cable, so it had to be cables and, controllers to be able to play. So that was, already 3,000 $3,000 to $4,000 dollars in order to get that equipment. So the cost was high, scalability was tricky because technology at that time needed a calibration and the interaction was not necessarily very rich. So we decided to improve that initial set of games. So we partnered with a company here in Toronto that we're also looking at developing games for tackling people with cognitive impairment. So we created this game called Seize the Day. It's available for free in some of the stores of the virtual reality headset, the Oculus store. But what you can do with this game is basically being transported into a tropical island scenario where you will be able to do different activities. So again, we conducted play testing sessions. So you see, this is an early prototype of the game. So we were testing how people were growing in virtual reality. Were they feeling motion sickness? Were they feeling, that they were progressing? Were they able to row or not? So these two were exercise professionals that were always helping us. I think she's an occupational therapist, and Mara is also an experienced recreational therapist. So we have people from different backgrounds always helping us towards, improving the way that we were prototyping the system. We were also conducting meetings with the company and the developers that didn't have a chance to come with us to the long-term care facilities, and they were bringing their ideas, and we were kind of talking all together with the physical and the exercise professionals, the scientists, researchers, and developers to kind of be able to have a common idea and a common knowledge of the population and the needs. Then we came out with these 3 different activities. Tai Chi is mostly for warming people up. So the exercise, the way of using this games are with people when they are seated is aiming to tackle the promotion of physical activity, especially in the core and upper limbs. So everything is happening when people are seated to prevent potential falls. And then at the beginning people do the Tai Chi, then they do a little bit more intense activity, rowing on the boat, and then they go to a fishing stage when they need to improve their range of movement by doing this specific movement constantly in order to get the fishes that they have, where they're inside the virtual environment. So we, after we designed this game and we make it available, we said, okay, now we need to see and test if these games are actually good to provide some specific health benefits among all the adults. And although COVID at that time was arriving, so people with cognitive impairments, were hard to get, or because of all the things that were happening in the long-term care facilities in Canada. So we decided to run a study with volunteer, community willing older adults. And what we did was basically sending something like this package. So it was a case, it was coming with a brand new virtual reality headset. We used this silicone strap so they would be able to clean the sweat. And then we also changed the conventional strap. So we changed it to a more to a better strap, so they will be able to wear the system in an easier way. So we also had deployed a manual, it was a printed manual. They will be able to see specific things of the usability of the games and some tests that they were doing, writing. And we tried these for 18 sessions. That was 3 times per week, 6 weeks. And we managed to send 13 virtual reality headsets to people all around Canada. And that's what we did. And, there's a small video that will show you how we did this. The deployment of this technology was actually a challenging thing, especially during COVID and during the lockdowns, because there was a lot of measures that we needed to consider with sending these, like sanitizing properly, okay, is this technology ready to be used at home? When a lot of the people that we had in our study, they didn't have any experience using virtual reality headset. It's a pretty emerging technology. So we decided that this could be an interesting journey, and we just finished indeed that specific study that was back in November, December. I think we finished with the 13 older adults. The games were reported in the virtual reality headset. I was constantly in remote calls with the older adults, showing them how to, the participants showing them how to play the system and going through the troubleshooting and many of the usability problems that they were having. But most of them, they really needed only like 1 hour to learn how to use the system, charge the system, and play them in a systematic way through the 6 weeks that we were trying to. So they were playing the games 3 times per week, and at the end of the experience, they were reporting on the levels of exertion. It's called rating of perceived exertion, and also the levels of enjoyment. We're also constantly in a remote fashion doing the assistance of the participants, and we're currently processing all of this amount of data. But overall, the preliminary results validate that it's feasible to use these type of systems to promote physical activity for at-home training. So still connected with some of my colleagues back in Colombia, and we kind of like did a very similar approach. So we had some interviews with older adults there. We have our country is basically divided in 5 different regions: the Caribbean, the Pacific, the one that is closer to the Amazon River, and then the Andes, Los Andes, like the one that is close to Los Andes, all the mountain complex. So we took this specific region, and we were exploring what were the activities that they were doing, and what were the familiar things that people 55 plus were having. And we did this especially with stroke participants that were doing physical rehabilitation after a stroke. So what we did here was, again, a game where they would be able to have some puzzles, and they would be able to see birds that are from that specific region. So they need to use a hammer here to destroy some boxes, and after destroying the boxes, you will be able to see birds and animals that are from that individual region. We were checking on the typical games that people used to play outdoors. There is this game in which you kind of like need to throw like a metallic piece in a sandbox, and then you will get something exploding over there. And then also sugarcane fields, where you will be riding a horse, and then you will be able to use a machete to kind of like cut down some of the sugarcane plants. So we are also testing this game with stroke survivors back in Colombia, but again, it's kind of like a similar process, getting to know people, getting to know the type of environments and the type of elements that they would like to see, and try to see how to recreate those using, virtual reality. So I've been showing you here some of the examples on, how these games and applications can be used to promote physical activity and to promote cognitive training in different populations. So I'm gonna give you some of the final remarks here. So games, from a research and a scientific perspective, games are a very interesting medium to, understand complex phenomena like, aging, or what is happening in the brain when people are aging, where people are doing exercises. So games are an interesting medium to do that. We're always looking at metrics and how to better quantify the progress of people when they're working with this. Sometimes we ask participants, how do you feel? Like, do you like the game or not? Or did you perceive any, differences or changes on your mood, on your, levels of anxiety or depression? People are constantly reporting positive and negative things when using the games. There are some people that they just don't like games and they don't enjoy the study, but sometimes they do it just because they compromise. So they fill out the form, and they, kept going in the study, and they want to collaborate with science, and that's totally okay for us. Whereas there's some other people that they really enjoy doing exercise while playing. And VR is here. We will start seeing more and more use cases of this technology because it's becoming cheaper and cheaper. This headset, for instance, is like $400, and there's already plenty of interesting content that you can access and you can play at home, and you can have fun activities. So I like doing many different STEM and reach out activities like this one. So I really thank you all for being here and coming to this talk. There's multiple ways in which we can stay connected and collaborate. We already discussed this with John. We can eventually run activities in which we'll be able to expose some of you to the use of these technologies, so you will be able to see if this is something that you would like or not to have in your life. I love doing what is called game jams, in which you kind of like join engineers, designers, and exercise professionals, and older adults to collaboratively design and create games. Those things can be done in a weekend, and then there's plenty of nice tools there that will allow us to create prototypes in a weekend. I also would like to run intergenerational gaming meetings where you can bring grandchildren, parents, and grandparents to play together. So any other activity that you believe could be interesting to do, count me in. I'm always looking for good spaces and good communities to talk and to play. And yeah, this is a final quote. It says, aging is an extraordinary process where you become the person you always should have been. And I think games are actually a good way to bring that person out. So you can reach me with my personal website or using the Waterloo email. So now I'm open to any questions.
Wow, that was really wonderful. Got me motivated to want to try some of your games. And one of our participants, S. Murray, has a suggestion for you for the Okanagan. As you know, we have a huge wine industry here. Mm-hmm. So based on her comment, I'm thinking what she's referring to is that you could develop an exercise game around picking grapes, stomping grapes, and making wine. That's for us.
Indeed. This is an anecdote. When people were playing the grape stomping game in Portugal, like a lot of them at the end suggested like we should have like a small glass of wine at the end as a way to compensate their force, because they were counting the amount of liters that they were producing. And each participant was producing like more than 100 liters per every 10 minutes that they were playing. So yeah, they were also joking with that.
Yes, that's a great idea to actually to show how much wine you're producing. That's wonderful. Good motivation to keep going.
Definitely.
So I'd like to invite people to add any comments or questions they have in the chat box. We'd be delighted to carry on this conversation for a few more minutes. You've certainly given us lots to think about in terms of what's possible around gaming and exercise, both for independent, healthy older adults, but also older adults who are dealing with various chronic illnesses like stroke, dementia, other things that might influence their functional ability. So it's really interesting to see the wide range of application this might have to such a wide range of people. One of the things that I'm kind of interested in is in your tailoring. I wonder if you found any differences or influences around gender in terms of whether men and women preferred different types of gaming, different activities, and if that was an important part of your tailoring at all.
Yeah, now that you mentioned, I have noticed certainly some specific differences. And what I can show you is, for instance, when we do all the modeling, we notice that, for instance, the hobbies that some of the female older adults were having back in Portugal were more related to things like gardening or like embroidery, whereas like some of the males were more prone towards fishing or outdoor activities, and there's certainly differences in not only the hobbies but also the motivation that they have for playing games. When when I was doing this, at some point we were thinking like maybe doing a differentiation between males and females, but that was a little bit tricky because a lot of the times for instance, the females were pushing that the motivation that they have for playing games was purely social interaction. So there's already kind of like well-established profiles of different gamers. That entire taxonomy that says, okay, there's some people that like exploring things, that play a game just because they have a lot of things to explore. There are people that are achievers, so they like to achieve things and get the points and get the level on. There's all the people that are socializers, so they like to play games just because they can get along with other people. The fourth one is more like the kind of like the killers, so people that like more shooting and they like to kind of like go more for the first-person shooters and those type of games. So we certainly have some differences among those profiles of gamers, and also when we implemented the games, we noticed that sometimes the males tend to be more competitive. They're more towards like checking the points, the scores. And when you do the setup of two males together, probably they will be somehow competing against each other. Whereas like, again, this is not happening. This is a generalization. Sometimes when you put the females, they're more towards collaboratively kind of like let them know like what was working for the gameplay and what was not. So those are like some of the differences that you sometimes find.
Yes, yeah, that's interesting. The other thing I'm kind of curious about is the novelty factor. I mean, I can see that, people might be really interested in trying this out, including myself. I'm curious about how they would work. And I guess I'm wondering over time, does the novelty wear off? When I think about the Pokemon game, I know a lot of youth were involved in that. But at one point this would be a great way for everyone, including older adults, to get out, walk in their community and find Pokemon, do Pokemon. But, even among the youth, the interest in that game, although it peaked, it then kind of went down really fast. At least I don't hear about it as much anymore. So I'm wondering about the novelty factor here, and if you thought about that, how we keep up people's motivation to engage in the game. Because I know some games have, lived on for years and years and years. When you think about even some board games that are very old but still played by many people, like Scrabble, for example.
Yeah.
And I realize it's not an exercise game, but it's a game that through generations.
That's one of the challenges that we as game designers have in order to create engaging games, like the long-term motivation of these games and the novelty effect is always playing a role in the studies. With this game, for instance, today we noticed that probably 20-30% of our participants, they were like after the 3 weeks, 4 weeks of playing with the game, they were already like, yo, the game is not evolving, the game is not proposing me more challenges, the game is feeling a little bit of stuck in those games. So that's always tricky to balance when creating these games. What we tend to do in our studies is of course trying to somehow create games that might have different levels. So yes. For instance, in this one we have Tai Chi, and then they move to rowing, and they move to fishing. So there's always like some different activities being proposed. The other thing that we have done before is allowing people to choose. make their own decisions inside the game. So today I feel like, no, I would prefer probably to do the stumping activity first, and then I will do the transportation of the barrel after. So that, choosing that thing is also kind of like important. And part of what we did with the adaptation using the heart rate information was also trying to push people towards, the game is not static. So the game, it doesn't always behave the same manner. So the game is pushing you towards moving faster or slower, depending on your heart rate responses. And there's an adaptive mechanism that is helpful to keep people engaged. With this game in particular, there was a very simple game, like it's a Pong game, but because it has that adaptive mechanism, people were really engaged. And in this game, we did like 6 weeks, 18 sessions. I think only one participant was saying, yeah, the game was a little bit boring, but the rest were like very engaged.
That's great. That's great. We do have a couple of questions here. Marco asks, have you designed games that would fit into and be specific to long-term care homes? And I think some of them you mentioned might be.
Yeah, there's one that was created using a specific type of technology, which kind of like uses some spatial information. You can see here, the system is actually detecting the position of the foot, and then it's detecting each position, and then it's allowing people to do the stepping. So you see here, for instance, this is yellow. It's telling you that this feet here is actually not on the ground, whereas this one is on the ground. So it's kind of like counting the amount of repetitions. So the other games, they don't have that type of technology, but I remember this one, there was a PhD student specifically working on this technology. There was a sensor recording the position and mapping it into the projection that we were having.
And so in a long-term care home, how would this work? Oh, you wouldn't have 3 people there. This is just one person using this?
Yes. Well, it has created 3 tanks, so people will be able to collaboratively play the game. But we have also tested this a game with people that are seated. And it also works. So if you are in a certain position and you have the sensor we are using is a Kinect sensor. So if you put it right in front, 3 meters apart, the sensor will be able to record your entire body. And then if you do this, even where you're seated, you will be able to play the game. So I know this system is actually being used in long-term care facilities in Portugal. They use this way of deploying the games. It's kind of a small module that has all the projector and the computer over here, so you can select the game that you want to play, and then you play.
Great. There's a comment from Grant. I'm a recent retiree and I'm now very excited to getting older after watching this webinar. Because as I get older, there's something to do other than sit in my room. Yeah, thank you for making this an important study. I hope the health industry pays attention.
Well, there's something that is happening right now, especially with this technology, which is allowing for more socially interactive applications to take off. So that means now, if you get, for instance, one of these, and then you connect through your account, then you will be able to connect to another person in another part of the world in the same virtual environment together in a very easy way. So you can create your own environment. You can go and go for a tour in a country in Europe while you are, still seated at home, but then you are using this, and you can activate a voice chat. We'll be able to talk while we are exploring and playing those games.
So in that respect, you could be virtually touring the same environment with a friend who's living in another country. Is that right?
Yeah.
And chatting.
And chatting.
Oh,
yeah. That's one of the coolest things that I've seen. That it's happening now, just because the evolution of this technology is more towards allowing social interactions. In the past, it's been mostly isolating people. So they put a headset and they are totally disconnected from the world.
Right.
But once you start like connecting multiple people with it, it makes it way more interesting.
Yeah, that's very exciting, and particularly relevant for even individuals living in rural communities who might not have resources right in their community. They can connect with other people virtually and do various activities and tour the world.
Yeah, well, we are also writing a project for the European Space Agency to see, for instance, how this can be used to those type of missions where like the astronauts are going out for many, months, weeks, even months, and how they will be able to keep connected or stay connected with their families and friends.
Wow, this is very exciting work. I see our time is up. So I do want to thank you so much for sharing this research. It's really, really exciting. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about it as it unfolds. We have a new program starting here at UBC Okanagan that is actually preparing students to do work in exactly this area. So it's called the CREATE program, and we're just starting to take grad students into it. So it's a very exciting time. So I want to, on behalf of the Embrace Aging team, thank you very much for starting us off in such a good way. And I also want to thank all the participants for joining us today and encourage everyone to check out some of our other events over the month of March. There's a whole bunch and they're a wide variety. So hope to see you again at some of the others. Once again, thank you very much, John, and all the best in your future research.
Thank you all for coming and for the invitation.
Bye.
See you. Ciao.